Have you ever heard of Mccarthyism? Mccarthyism is the obsession with finding the red that is moving toward the US. Today, it is also used to describe unfounded, illogical claims or fake news. Mccarthyism is the modern-day witch hunt. Being labeled as the red without any discernible explanation caused severe harm to many people at the time. How did the Mccarthyism come to be powerful, and why, after McCarthy's death 70 years ago, does Mccarthyism still exist today? Therefore, we can now study Mccarthyism. In 1908, a Wisconsin farming family gave birth to Josiah Raymond McCarthy, and he went on to practice law after earning his law degree from Marquette University in 1953. He was unable to enjoy his work, so he decided to run for and get elected to a Wisconsin judgeship. Following that, he quit his job as a judge in 1941 and enlisted as an officer in the Marine Corps. In 1945, after receiving his military discharge, he started working seriously in politics. In 1946, McCarthy was elected a senator. He did not, however, live much of his career as a senator. McCarthy received guidance on how to capitalize on anti-socialism in 1915. The Soviet atomic bomb project, Chinese communication with the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union's influence on the world at the time caused widespread fear of the left. On February 9, 1915, McCarthy associated that he received a list of 250 communists from the Department of State. It was a whole fabrication. It was the first accusation without a convincing defense. And the majority of those McCarthy labeled as members of the left had left the Department of State by the point. McCarthy might, however, become more prominent as a result of his claim. Robert Bloch, an American editorial cartoonist and author, created Mccarthyism. Mccarthyism, according to him, is defined as an agitation, unjustified slander, and personal attacks. McCarthy argued that the fight against communism is Mccarthyism and that this cause should bring people together. McCarthy had a benefit from a number of events that occurred at the time. First of all, the Korean War. People who shudder in terror of the left can now look to McCarthy as their savior thanks to the Korean War. McCarthy associated high-ranking officer allegiance to communists rather than Western culture was the reason why American youth were killed in Korea. President Truman withdrew from McCarthy in this circumstance. McCarthy accused Truman of firing McCarthy, whom he considered to be the greatest American, and said that McCarthy's resignation marked the communist triumph. John Edgar Hoover, the FBI director, also backed McCarthy. Hoover, who oversaw the FBI from 1924 until 1972, had a significant influence on society and secretly manipulated a president. Hoover was impossible to remove under any of the president. Hoover instructed his men to gather information from McCarthy and counseled him to complicate the first accusations. Over a period of 13 years, Hoover assisted McCarthy. McCarthy has harmed numerous individuals including professors, politicians, poets, and historians. McCarthy specifically accused President Truman of communism in terms of his policies. McCarthy had a significant impact at the time, to the point when J.P. Dwight Eisenhower asked McCarthy to back him in the presidential race. McCarthy participated in the campaign fully. In the assembly election, which was taking place in 60 states, he spoke in favor of Eisenhower and the J.P. candidate. According to estimates, McCarthy could have helped elect at least 8 politicians. McCarthy had a significant impact. In some way, Secretary of State Durst of the Eisenhower administration told the officer McCarthy had targeted, "I know you are not at blame." The public was unanimous in its support for McCarthy. Despite his dislike for McCarthy, Eisenhower caved into threats of McCarthyism as a result of the overwhelming positive public response. Public opinion was McCarthy's main supporter. Because of McCarthy's influence, all newspapers, excluding those on the far right, were McCarthy supporters. For instance, because it published a hostile piece about McCarthy, Time News magazine was accused of being the red news magazine, and advertisers withdrew their support. The Washington Post was initially hostile to McCarthy in this instance, but due to financial pressure, they was forced to write an anti-communism article. Even McCarthy himself struck out on McCarthy's critic, journalist Drew Pearson. Pearson might not survive if Nixon didn't put an end to their argument. Of course, everyone did nothing but observe McCarthy's wicked deed. Particularly, the broadcast journalist Edward Murrow aired a documentary exposing McCarthy's dishonesty and insanity. Its opinion of McCarthy decreased as a result of this program, but it was a fatal blow. The Army McCarthy hearings and Hoover's betrayal dealt McCarthy his fatal blow. In actuality, it took place as a result of Eisenhower's heightened rage toward McCarthy. McCarthy accused the army of being too far infuriated Eisenhower since he was in the army. To expose McCarthy's corruption, Eisenhower held an Army McCarthy hearing. Following David Sukin's enlistment, McCarthy and his advisor Loycon increased the pressure on the army for special treatment after they had previously asked for special consideration for Sukin's exemption from military duty. He behaved impolitely by being out of control throughout the proceedings, and it was all broadcast. Finally, after transmission, the disapproval rating increased by more than 50%. Following that, Hoover abandoned McCarthy, believing that drifting apart from him would be advantageous given Eisenhower's desire to do so. Eisenhower was informed by Hoover about the plot to install McCarthy as president after the collapse of Eisenhower's administration. Finally, due to a lack of information, McCarthy suffered a humiliating loss during the Army McCarthy hearings. McCarthy was expelled from the Senate following the hearings and later passed away from alcohol poisoning. All the individuals involved in the Mccarthyism controversies innocent. Unexpectedly, the majority of them are spies. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, who were executed after being accused of giving the Soviet information about the atomic bomb, served as a standard McCarthyist scapegoat. They were ordinary people. It was the only instance in which citizens died acting as spies, shocking the entire country. In reality, though they disseminated information about the atomic bombs during the World War II, not Cold War, obviously they did not get along, but they were allies during World War II. After the end of World War II in 1945, McCarthyism began. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg unintentionally turned into spies in just 5 years. So did Julius and Ethel Rosenberg serve as spies? The Mccarthyism was absolute insanity. Mccarthyism, however, did not finish it. There were many false reports and dubbed people. It is not too strange. There is no denying that Texas support was a major factor in McCarthy's rise to power. If the populace lacked intelligence, the state would blind them. So thank you for watching this video, and please don't forget to click the subscribe and the like button.